When I was a little kid and I first learned about Irish soda bread, I was pumped because I pictured bread, one of my favorite foods, made with two things that my mom basically always forbid in the house: Lucky Charms cereal and orange soda. You could say I was a little disappointed when I tried it for the first time, but that has all changed. Soda bread isn't just fast, fun, flavorful, and fiber-packed. It also lends itself surprisingly well to alliteration. In the speedy bread category, soda bread trumps all other contenders. Even so-called quick breads like banana bread call for more ingredients and take longer to put together. The oldest recipes for Irish soda bread call for just 4 ingredients: whole grain flour, salt, buttermilk, and baking soda. And the dough comes together way faster than you can preheat your oven. Now, given my soda and cereal beginnings with this bread, I really wanted to get to the bottom of what makes an authentic loaf. My good buddy Donal was born and raised in Ireland, but now he lives out in LA. He's written tons of cookbooks, he has a TV show, and an awesome YouTube channel dedicated to home cooking. And he's promised to show me how to make his Irish soda bread. What does your Irish soda bread start with? Like, what's the first ingredient that goes in?
The first thing I do is a big bag of flour and a big bag of wholemeal flour. So 2 as a combination to lighten that wholemeal flour out. I'm going to introduce the controversial ingredient that I add.
Yeah, I know, you're waiting for it. An egg?
And the egg I add is for richness, and it also kind of helps you get a more sort of solid loaf as it comes out. A little bit of honey. Now, that is not a traditional ingredient in there, but the sweetness works really well.
Do you get your stand mixer out or your food processor out to put this together?
Literally, you should be doing it with your hand. I mean, that's how my grandmother used to do it.
So I noticed most Irish soda bread is scored. That has like a kind of a cross on top of it. Like, is that because of expansion? Like, what's the reason behind that?
Well, maybe it's expansion, but what I was always told is that it was to let the fairies out. So you're blessing the bread. It's something that I do every time I make the loaf.
My final question is around how you eat Irish soda bread. So it's like an everyday bread, you always want it around, but butter, yes butter.
It's the perfect vehicle for some cold Irish butter that should be thick enough that when you bite into it, you see teeth marks. And if that's not the case, you haven't done it right.
Okay, this is fantastic. Thank you for all of this awesome background information. I think it's enough for me to get into the kitchen and start making some Irish soda bread.
I know you can do it. I have full faith.
Now, before we get baking, let's look at why soda bread is one of the fastest breads you can make. Check out this experiment. To this empty bottle, I'm adding some lukewarm water that I've dissolved some sugar into. Then I'll add a bunch of instant yeast and pop on the balloon. We'll let that sit while I add vinegar to the second water bottle. Using a funnel, I'm adding baking soda to the balloon itself. Then we just attach it to the bottle, invert the balloon, and whoa, look at that reaction. The balloon instantly inflates. On the other hand, the yeast setup doesn't really look like it's doing anything. We have to wait at least 10 minutes before we see some activity, and considerably longer than that till the balloon actually inflates. Now, don't get me wrong, yeast is a wonderful thing. Along with creating carbon dioxide that will inflate the balloon or the gluten network in a loaf of bread, it's doing its thing and creating tons of flavorful byproducts. But it's relatively slow to do its thing. Baking soda, or sodium bicarbonate on the other hand, reacts instantly when it encounters an acid in solution. And that is great for speed. I think it's time to put together a loaf. And for that, we need Cooks Illustrated Deputy Food Editor Andrea Geary's recipe for Irish brown soda bread. You remember Andrea from the Ultimate Biscuit Showdown, right? She created the easiest, fastest biscuits ever. And now she's done it again with bread. Man, Andrea's bringing the speedy carbs to the masses. Now, one thing that we don't really have here in the US is wholemeal flour. It's whole wheat flour that is really coarsely ground. So you get these big pieces of bran and germ that help break up the structure of the loaf, give you this really nice coarse crumb. American whole wheat is actually ground pretty fine. So the best way to get that coarseness back is to add some wheat germ and some wheat bran. Okay, real quick wheat primer. This is a wheat berry. The starchy white core is the endosperm. It's where white flour is ground from and where the gluten-forming proteins glutenin and gliadin are found. Then we have the fiber-rich bran, which acts as a protective coating on the wheat berry. And finally, the oil-rich germ. Okay, let's get back to the recipe. I'm starting with whole wheat flour and adding some all-purpose flour in a 2-to-1 ratio. The all-purpose flour will improve gluten development and give us more structure and lift. Then we add our bran and our germ, and we're gonna add a little sugar. Then the star of our show, we gotta have that baking soda. We're gonna go off the traditional script, but we're actually gonna add some baking powder to the mix. This is double acting baking powder, meaning that we get a burst of carbon dioxide production when it first gets wet, and then a second burst when it heats up in the oven. That combination of baking soda and baking powder will give our loaf additional lift. And the final dry ingredient is salt. Now for the buttermilk, and no messing around there. It's the source of acidity that will react with the baking soda. Then we just use a rubber spatula to fold and mix. What am I talking about? I gotta get my hands in there like Donald did. Now we just shape it into a round but rustic loaf, score it in order to let the fairies out, and then transfer it to a cake round to bake. Just look at this gorgeous thing. It's deeply browned, it's craggy, it's perfect for slicing and slathering with salted butter. One thing is for certain, this is how to eat Irish soda bread. So big thanks to Donal. If you haven't checked out Donal's channel yet, you gotta do it. He's got awesome recipes on there. There's a link to it below. And if you haven't subscribed here, what are you waiting for? Hit that button.